Waterloo's first educational institution was a simple log schoolhouse, built in 1820. Once the region grew and outgrew the school's modest capacity, the 16 by 20 structure served as a residence for the next 50 years. This important landmark now rests in Waterloo Park. Thanks to the efforts of many individuals and collectives over its 200-year history, it continues to serve the community. Among its many admirers is social historian Joanna Rickert-Hall, who has written extensively about this historical gem and its relationship to other important local narratives.
This schoolhouse itself is a valuable cultural icon, but also a built heritage icon for all of the region, and particularly Kitchener and Waterloo. So it also encompasses Black history and early settlement education. So a number of the themes are covered that makes this school a building of significance, and certainly something that I think the region should be proud of. As far as the community of Waterloo is concerned, it is the first school that the community had built, and it was built by the community. In fact, it was built on land that was donated by Abraham Erb. Many people locally will recognize that name. He came here in 1806 from Pennsylvania. He himself owned several thousand acres of land, so he was significant. The first school built in Kitchener was in 1815. Waterloo's children would have had a very difficult time if they would have wanted to attend that school, because the area itself would have been bounded by heavily wooded areas and certainly a number of swampy areas. You might have even heard of a log road, a corduroy road that had been uncovered in uptown Waterloo. By 1820, Waterloo finally decided it was time to have a school of its own. Children at this point would have had to walk up to 5 miles to get to school. School in this time period was convened for these kids mostly in the winter. And for us, that's kind of odd. Why would it be in the winter? Well, most of these kids worked and lived on their family farms. So they couldn't be excused from chores, so they could go to school. So in the wintertime, there was less for them to have to take care of on the farm, and they could be excused for a few hours a day to go to school. The school itself originally stood near the corner of Central and King in Waterloo, uptown. And when it was originally built, it was in the middle of, again, a wooded area on land that was actually owned by Abraham Erb. Now, teachers themselves were not licensed at that point like they are today. And in this case, most of the people who performed the role of a teacher were actually farmers themselves. Parents would have been required to pay tuition, and at that point, a sum of $2 or $3 per child, which doesn't seem like much to us, but if there's a large family, and certainly in the early 1800s, that's a lot of money. This would have gone for a 4-month school term and would have certainly contributed to the pay or the salary for the teacher. As well as paying tuition, children would have to provide their portion of wood to heat the schoolhouse. And so by 1842, the schoolhouse itself was not able to accommodate the growing student body. And so at that point, the school was demolished, but in very thrifty style, which is very indicative of our early settlers, they dismantled it and relocated it not too far away. The school itself was rebuilt near what is today presently KCI, Kitchener Collegiate Institute. So in Kitchener, near where Central Fresh Food Market is. And that is where eventually it became a residence. We have to appreciate that the whole community itself continued to grow and prosper. And by the 1890s, at that point, City of Waterloo was considering building a park where we are located today. And even though the schoolhouse by this point had been vacated by its resident, Levi, The building itself was deemed to be too important to the local heritage that they didn't want to tear it down. And rather than let it fall apart in disrepair, the locals banded together and it was moved to its present location in 1894. So it certainly is one of the first buildings that would have been here in the park. There was a lot of work that was done. Thousands of trees were planted. They did a little bit of work, as they are doing today, on Silver Lake. And part of the maintenance also included the preservation or conservation of the schoolhouse. So you figure over the years, the schoolhouse, even though it has been here and is only periodically open now for things like Doors Open, it's had a long and storied history even in the park. There was a time that it was used as a pop stand, and there were other activities that took place here. In fact, a year after it was built, there was a reunion here, and there's actually a well-known photo of a group of students who at that point, many of whom were very elderly, taken in front of the schoolhouse, who had actually attended a picnic here in memory of their early days when this was used as a school. Many of the people who attended the schoolhouse eventually became very productive and well-known citizens in the area. And some of them even contributed having political careers as well. In the 1950s and into the early 1960s, as you can appreciate, the schoolhouse was aging significantly. And at that point, even though most of the original logs were still intact, there was a lot of repair that was needed. And through the auspices of a local teachers union, some funding was set aside for the conservation of the schoolhouse. And in the late 1960s into the early 1970s, some children who were actually students of Laurel Vocational School, which is today Waterloo campus for Conestoga College, they came and effected many of the repairs that are still here. Things like raising the school so that it was not laying on bare ground, and adding vents and things like that underneath the school. There was also a re-roofing project that had taken place for the building. And in fact, that was a Mennonite craftsman who came and oversaw that work as well. So there has been care and upkeep over the years that the city has undertaken so that we still have this fine example of an icon. I need to also remind the community that the important thing here is that with the school, it's also the oldest remaining log school that we know of in the province of Ontario. And so, yes, it was a residence for over 50 years, but even as a nod to early education, 1820 is an extensively old building, particularly for the city of Waterloo. And there are only a handful of buildings that are older in this community. So this is certainly one of the earliest.